Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Bare Feet, and with me today are my fellow bears, or circus bears, whatever you want to call it, my good friends Camden Spees and Mark Arnold. Say hi.
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 you try to do the deep Papa Bear voice, huh? So this is Bare Feet, released on the 10th of December 1949 with a blue ribbon reissue at some point in 1957. It's the 575th in the series and it's directed by the great Chuck Jones. You can find this restoration on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 6 DVD set, and I have a link below.
It is 6, yeah.
It's a beautiful restoration, but in terms of this HD version, I'm actually not even sure where it's come from. So I guess someone in the comments will have to mention that. As for the synopsis, in case you haven't seen this one, as it's a copyrighted cartoon, I can't show it in full on YouTube or else I get a big spanking. So, Papa Bear reads a newspaper which has an ad for Trick Bears. So, Papa Bear decides the family will audition to be the Trick Bears. And, well, as you can predict, the practice sessions for the audition do not go well at all.
Get off the wire, you oversized freak head!
Two bits of trivia. First of all, it's the second last Three Bears cartoon, so we're nearing this very short run of these characters, which is a shame because I absolutely love Three Bears cartoons. But the other one might be interesting for some. They look at Mel Brank's credit in the beginning and go, well, hang on, he doesn't voice Mama, Papa, or Junior Bear, so why is he credited? Well, as I mentioned on the previous track, he will get credit even if he does something very minor. And from listening to the cartoon, me and the boys agree that it's most likely the yell when Papa Bear is jumping off a cliff. Spoiler alert, sorry guys. But that seems to be the only likely thing, because he definitely wasn't the narrator. I think the narrator is also Stan Freberg, but I could be wrong there. But there was a reference to the circus, so the Ringling Brothers?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the cartoon, it's called Mingling Brothers. And certainly in 1949, the biggest circus in the world was the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, which unfortunately met its demise in 2017 after like 135 years or some crazy amount of time. So now it's a joke going to start being lost on future audiences. So.
Yeah, like what's a circus?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's still Cirque du Soleil, but there's not a Ringling Brothers anymore. So.
Exactly. I know there's circuses here in Australia that they go around, but there's definitely no animals. I remember growing up in the 90s there were animals, but I think they phased that out for, well, right. It should be pretty obvious why they would phase out the animals, of course. But nowadays it's all about acrobatics and stuff, which is still pretty cool. So if you do see a local circus and they don't have animals, definitely support them, because there's some interesting stuff in that. So, but what else is interesting is Junior Bear laughing at that wonderful comic. I mean, obviously he's being very exaggerated laugh, but then again, the comic strips might have been that good. Maybe you will laugh that much. I don't know. But, Camden, so was there indeed a Bugs Bunny comic strip at the time?
Well, there was a Bugs Bunny comic strip for over 50 years. It ran until 1990.
Wow.
It ran from like 43 to 90. It was first originated by Chase Craig, who would later run Dell Comics and Gold Key Comics. He was doing it during early 40s, and if you want to know more about that, talk to Mark Hausler. He has a copy of all of them. And Roger Armstrong did the strip for a while, but by 1949, Ralph Heimdall and Al Stoffel were doing the strip, and they did it from until the 70s. And when the comic strip, as the comic books were different than the cartoons, so were the strip, and the strips were different from the comic, I always consider it Earth 3 Looney Tunes. Now, Heimdall and Stoffel did the comic strip with Sylvester in the British accent. That looks more like Heimdall's Bugs Bunny than the WB Studio Bugs Bunny. And Mark, you would agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Another little fact, though, by the way, a lot of the people who are associated with the strip, like ghosting for Heimdall, would be people like Carl Barks and Arnold Drake, who both would go on to be really famous later.
I wonder what Carl Barks did. It's a big mystery.
He did it, I think, in like 52.
Yeah.
Sounds about right, yeah. But for those that don't know, because some people don't know, Carl Barks ended up doing the Donald Duck comics, and he also had Scrooge McDuck and being a boy and all that sort of stuff. Just in case, because some people They might be discovering this video and they have no ideas. But yes, Carl Barks, big name in the Disney Comics world.
And at the time, they were also in Dell Comics, obviously, for a while now. They were, for over 8 years, they were in the Dell comic books by this point.
Oh, I've read some of the old Bugs Bunny comics, but as you say, so you got the cartoons, you've got Bugs Bunny in the comics as another thing, but then you got now the Bugs Bunny strip as another thing. Wow, that's
right.
Yeah,
and they never have a good continuity, because in the animated cartoons, Bugs Bunny is usually in a hole, whereas in the comic books and comic strips, he's living in a standard house.
Or he's in in the strip or in the comic, depending on what era, he's also living like sometimes he's living like he's rooming with Porky and a couple of them. Or he lives in a hole.
Yeah, I do want to say this about comic strips. In 1949, it's kind of funny as far as the hierarchy, as far as what had the most status back then. There's animated cartoons, there's comic books and comic strips. The thing all these artists seem to aspire to is to have their own comic strip. Even Chuck Jones tried a comic strip later. That was considered the thing to want. Nowadays, it would be probably the opposite. It's like nobody wants a comic strip because, they're never in any newspapers or anything. It's just, the difference of status.
Of course.
Every artist you can think of, like Chuck Jones, by the way, speaking of his comic strip, I don't mean to make it a bash plug, buy Curtis Findley's book.
Yes.
The Dream That Never Was.
Yep.
Okay.
I did.
Yeah, I know you did. I did. I bought 2 copies of it, and I got one from Linda, his daughter.
In fact, I interviewed Curtis Findley, but that's
another thing entirely, of course. But just to put it into perspective, there was one point you had people aspiring to work in the movies, and TV was beneath them. And whereas these days, TV is seen as just as good as movies, if not maybe even better in some cases. So tastes change and aspirations change, but yes, comic strips were the dream for a lot of artists. But
that's what they grew up with.
Exactly.
People like George Harriman or Winsor McKay, those were the equivalent to people like, George Harriman and Winsor McKay were artists in 1918. That's when Chuck Jones was growing up, right? And Bud Fisher or Tad Dorgan and those were artists when they were growing up.
For sure. But if you guys want us to explore the comics even further in another video, definitely let us know in the comments below. I mean, I definitely would love to do something along those lines, because I'm also a comic book fan, so it's like, hey, another interest, hooray. But going back to this cartoon, so as I mentioned before, I love the 3 bears. I love the characters in this. It's just hilarious. But would you guys say that Papa Bear's a bit too abusive to his son?
That's the funniest part. This is like one of the most suicidal cartoons I've ever seen.
Everyone's trying to explain to him why we're doing this, audition thing. I mean, because obviously, spoiler alert, the newspaper he was reading was a really old one. Now, why he would have a newspaper from back then, I don't know. But whatever, you just go with it, I suppose, for the gag. But, you got things like hit my baby son, like that stupid... All right, Captain. Which one did you like out of them?
The launched into space one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, because there's good timing in that, and he just, as you said to us earlier, Mike Maltese milks that gag to where you almost think he's dead.
Yeah.
You almost think they all think, they go hand in hand as if, he's just dead. And then you go inside, and they come back out, and and then he falls to the ground. I think that was funny.
And of course, the topper of that is that he still lands in the wrong place anyway. So it works out so good. And Mark Maltese was doing this in so many of the shorts recently, and in the next one, which of course is Rabbit Hood, which we'll obviously be doing very shortly. But yeah, he likes to just milk it. And I think it's incredible, and it works. It works. I also like even the simpler gags, like She Was Acrobat's daughter. You're playing with the trapeze, and of course, you got Junior Bear trying to cycle on this tightrope, and of course, everything sinks.
Let me say this about this cartoon, okay? I watched this cartoon before we did this commentary, and I had forgotten, and now I remember, that back in the days when I used to watch Looney Tunes voraciously, we're talking 70s and 80s, of the 5 Three Bears cartoons, this one never aired. And it was probably because of the suicide thing, but I never knew it was missing. I saw the Father's Day one all the time. I saw the Bee one all the time. The Bugs Bunny one all the time. But this one was always kind of MIA. And then when I had started seeing it, and I might have even seen it the first time when it was on the Golden Collection, I just thought it was a really violent and not as funny cartoon compared to some of the other ones. If I think of anything that's funny, which is really dark, is the Hit My Baby Son 25 cents shots. I mean, that's really terrible, but it made me laugh when I saw it. So I don't know, but that's horrible.
Exactly.
And Chuck Jones has a tendency to do that at some times. You could go through all his Roadrunner cartoons, and occasionally there'll be one that is like, it seems extremely unfair to the Coyote, and it's like he gets more banged up than usual, and it's like, come on, leave the guy alone. That's how I kind of feel about it.
Feel a lot more grief if that Junior Bear wasn't 8 feet tall and extremely stupid. Because, I mean, if he was your son, if he was around you during the day, that voice would just drive you nuts.
Right.
So you'd be like, you know what? I'm just going to sit here. It's really uncomfortable, but this kid's annoying.
What I also remind me of is years later when Jay Ward was doing the Fractured Fairy Tales, they did a Three Bears, and they had the same thing where there was an oversized Sun Bear and the diminutive Papa Bear, and you bop them in the nose and you go, shut up, things like that.
And Jay Ward was even more violent because I thought his Pinocchio parody was he's like, you know what? Stay wood.
I'm sure Bill Scott saw these Chuck Jones Three Bears things and figured I can do a version of that, and basically is doing a riff on these with the small Papa Bear and the gigantic Baby Huey like Baby Bear.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that also seems to be a trope in cartoons and even in certain comedy movies to have like the big belligerent son, just fall, and all that stuff. So
it's fantastic.
It makes for funny stuff.
Exactly. But I like the subtle thing in this one, which made me laugh, and maybe it's not the most funniest thing in the world, but I got amused by it, and that's the different costume changes for Mama Bear throughout the cartoon. Just how she's just trying to, be good to her man kind of thing. I mean, come on, it's a 40s cartoon, so of course she's got to be to do what her man wants to do, right? But I just think it's incredible just how dedicated she is, even though she knows deep down it's like, this man is an idiot. He read a 1928 newspaper, and yet, I got to support my man. So there it is. But to slightly wrap this one up, gentlemen, now, what would you rate this one? Because, I mean, for me, I'm giving this one, about 7.5 out of 10, 8 out of 10. I don't know. I'm sort of leaning towards there. I think it's funny. I think the gag, especially for Papa Bear being launched into space, is great. And, of course, Junior Bear always is hilarious. Mark, what would you rate this one?
I think about 7, yeah. Because like I said, I have a fondness of Bear for Punishment, which is a Father's Day one, and Bedeviled Bruin, which is the B one. I think those are far funnier than this one. So that's what hinders that one for my enjoyment of this one. I'm not saying there isn't any laughs at all. It's just when you have other stuff to compare to, it's like, wow, this isn't the top one.
No, well, that's right. Especially in 1949, where you have so many masterpieces, including the next one, which is Rabbit Hood. I mean, wow. But Camden, what would you rate this one?
I'm going to rate it higher. I'm going to rate it like an 8.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, I said between 7.5 and 8, so there you go. So we're roughly in the same ballpark. It's a good cartoon, but maybe not as memorable as some of the others, especially in 1949. So I'm sure we can agree on that. But in any case, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.
I'm going to be free! Free at last!
I saved your life, Pa. I done a good thing. Yes, I did. Yes, I... Ah! What did I do? What did I do?